Special investigation into what is being called Climategate. We have coverage from around the world for you tonight. John Roberts is in London and went to the university, which is at the center of it all. Becky Anderson is in Copenhagen, where thousands of people around the world are gathering right now for the Global Climate Change Summit. And Tom Foreman is breaking down the facts for us at the Magic Wall tonight. President Obama will be there in Copenhagen next week, and hanging over it all is this email scandal that is calling into question the very science behind global warming. So we're going to start for you tonight at the beginning.
Stolen emails, suspicions of conspiracy. It sounds like espionage, not science.
I just logged on normally to check what had been going on in the blog overnight, and I couldn't log on. And I thought that was very strange.
Some are calling it Climategate. This NASA climate scientist witnessed it as it all began to unravel on his own blog site.
I tried a few more of the login IDs that I knew about. None of those worked either.
Dr. Gavin Schmidt shut his blog site down, but it was already too late.
Somebody had uploaded this entire file of all of these emails, and these emails are from people I know. And in fact, they include emails that I've sent and have received.
Emails stolen by hackers from this research center at the University of East Anglia in the UK were hand-picked and posted on the internet. A controversy erupted after the emails raised questions about whether some scientists might have manipulated data, suppressed dissenting research, and overstated the case of man-made climate change.
Well, this shows various weather systems.
Dr. Michael Mann, the director of the Penn State Earth Systems Science Center, who is under inquiry by his own university, was one of the first scientists to come under fire.
The first thought in my mind was, don't tell me it's come to this, that the sort of the opponents of action to combat climate change have reached such a low point where they've actually stolen people's personal emails.
And this is the email at the center of the controversy. An email sent to Dr. Mann from Phil Jones, the head of the climate research unit at the University of East Anglia. Jones, another casualty of the hacked emails, chose to step down while the university conducts an investigation.
In an email dated Tuesday, the 16th of November, 1999, Phil Jones writes, quote, "I've just completed Mike's nature trick of adding in the real tense to each series for the last 20 years, i.e. from 1981 onwards, and from 1961 for Keith's To Hide the Decline." People see the word trick. There have been all kinds of accusations about that word. Could be duped. What does he mean by saying the word trick?
Scientists, mathematicians often use the word trick in the sense of a clever approach to solving a problem. We had one data set that stretched way into the past, but it didn't come up to the present. It stopped in 1980. At the same time, we had more recent data that showed how the Earth has warmed in the subsequent decades. And in order to understand the longer-term data, it needs to be put in the context of the more recent data so that the relative warmth today can be compared to the relative warmth in the past. And so the trick was simply presenting these two data sets together so that they could be compared against each other. It was completely out in the open, so there was nothing hidden or secret. It was just what my colleague was calling a clever way to present the data.
What about the word decline? What's that referring to?
He refers to tree ring information. They were looking at the density of the wood that formed in those annual growth bands. And it turns out that that measure is highly correlated with summer temperatures where these trees grow.
For decades, scientists have used tree rings to chart the Earth's past temperatures. Before 1960, temperature records from tree rings matched up with other temperature records. After 1960, scientists discovered some tree ring records no longer correlated with other temperature measurements.
email that referred to the decline was simply referring to the fact that these data shouldn't be used after 1960 because of this divergence, because of this decline. So this was something that was completely out in the open. It was in the published literature.
No cover-up.
No cover-up. It was perhaps a poor choice of words. And again, I imagine that my colleague, if he knew that his personal emails were going to be read by the entire world, he might have been a little bit more careful in how he worded things.
And that report from Brooke Baldwin of CNN's Special Investigations Unit. Next, we're going to hear from one of the skeptics who was named in those emails. He was called a bozo, a moron, the Joe McCarthy of climate change. You're going to hear what he has to say about it all when we come back. Right now, thousands of people from 192 countries are gathered in Copenhagen for the UN Climate Conference. The big announcement expected tomorrow that this has been the warmest decade on record. But as world leaders try to figure out what to do about that, a scandal is hanging over the event. These thousands of emails and documents hacked from one of the world's top global warming research centers, creating a lot of confusion about the science behind climate change. What about those emails has created such an uproar? Well, with me now to talk about this is Stephen McIntyre, who was slammed in a number of those emails for questioning global warming. Princeton professor Michael Oppenheimer, who has helped write the UN's climate change report. Also with us, Chris Horner, author of Red Hot Lies, How Global Warming Alarmists Use Threats, Fraud, and Deception to Keep You Misinformed. And back with me, who has been doing a lot of research on all of this, is our very own CNN's John Roberts, joining us for this conversation as well. Welcome to everybody. Stephen, let me start with you here. You're personally attacked in some of these emails. You are called everything from a bozo to a moron to the Joe McCarthy of climate change. How do you characterize what's going on with the emails? Do you think this is an attempt to shut down criticism?
Sure they are. In discussion of the trick, let's be quite frank about it, it was a trick. The tree ring records went down in the late part of the 20th century. Instead of disclosing that in the 2001 IPCC report, they didn't show the decline. In another document, the 1999 World Meteorological Report, that is the subject of the email in question, they simply substituted temperature information for the tree ring information to show the record going up when it went down. There's nothing mathematically sophisticated about that.
Let me go to Michael here. Michael, professor, you were a recipient of some of the hacked emails in question. To a lay person, I mean, Stephen just gave us two examples there. To somebody like me, who is not a scientist, it does look like these scientists cherry-picked certain bits of information to make the case.
There was no deception here. I mean, let's step back. From a scientific point of view, before this episode occurred, we knew the Earth was warming, sea level was rising, glaciers are melting, the sea ice is retreating, the ocean is becoming more acidic, all due to the buildup of the greenhouse gases. Nothing in this episode changes any of that. Even if you think that the British group was somehow cheating, which I don't believe it was, you could throw them out. And there are three other groups, a Japanese group and two American groups, who've done analysis on the temperature data and reached the conclusion that Earth is warming and the warming is unique in climate history. So there's nothing here that changes the picture. We knew the critics have had decades, because they have access to the data too. They have had decades to prove that the global warming observations are wrong, and they haven't been able to do it. Until they do, we know that greenhouse gases are building up. That's partly responsible for the warming of the Earth. And until those emissions are brought under control, for instance, by the government's meeting in Copenhagen right now, the Earth is simply going to continue to warm.
Okay, one of those critics you just mentioned is Chris Horner. And Chris, I know you're not a scientist, you're an attorney. You are a longtime critic of this, a skeptic, and you have long argued that scientists are cooking the data. But I mean, what's the motive for that? I mean, that's always been my question when somebody raises the questions about the scientists. What are their motives in cooking the data? What are they trying to achieve?
Well, I don't argue that they're cooking the data. I named these guys' names and I described what they were doing, relying in great part on Stephen McIntyre's terrific work, among others, in Red Hot Lies. It's out there, and now we know in their own words what they were doing. And why is, well, you know, we'd have to perform brain surgery on these people, but the fact is scientists are people too, and they're subject to every human motivation, including tremendous amounts and increasing amounts of taxpayer funding, which increases with the alarm, as well as ideology in the President's chief science advisor's case,
but if the data, it's a tough leap to make. If the data's not there, if it doesn't exist and the science doesn't back it up, then you're suggesting there's this massive global conspiracy to make a certain case, and it just logically doesn't make sense.
Well, that's just one more thing made up there.
Hold on, let Chris
nobody
make his point,
suggested a massive global conspiracy. I said these people have proven in their own words what Stephen pointed out they did. They falsified results.
But it's beyond this group. I mean, you're talking about a lot of other people who found very similar
Let's talk about the falsified results. That's Climategate. They falsified results. It's the fraud stupid to oversimplify it. That's what we're talking about. We don't have to keep changing the subject. It's not about locker room talk between scientists. It's the fraud. Stephen proved it. These people have admitted it.
But Stephen, let me just go back to you, because I know you are a skeptic and you have raised questions, but and tell me if my read's not accurate. Your criticism is a little more nuanced than that. I mean, I didn't read you as saying fraud, but you tell me.